Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Edenton, North Carolina. It's been recognized by Forbes magazine as one of America's prettiest towns. This first colonial capital of North Carolina is steeped in rich history, scenic beauty, and incredible architecture. And like many small southern towns, there's a white Edenton and a black one. But there's a group of people who are determined to change that by getting to know their neighbors one person at a time. Find out who they are and why they care. Race and Reconciliation, the story of Edenton, North Carolina. Stay tuned for another view. We'll be right back.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. About 5,000 people call Edenton, North Carolina home. It's a picturesque town full of history and pride, but it's sadly true as in many small southern towns, folks pretty much stick to their own kind, blacks with blacks, whites with whites. But 3 years ago, a group of people in Edenton decided to make a change. They decided that things would be better if the racists would just sit down and talk to each other. That was some of the beginning of the Edenton United Methodist Church Reconciliation Group. And we have some of their members with us today to share their experiences of coming together. Please welcome to Another View Dr. Emma Bonner, a native of Edenton who came back home after retiring as a school principal in D.C. Dr. Bonner, how are you?
I'm fine.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here to be with you to share another view.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. Mr. Bill Miller, who retired to Edenton 13 years ago and is currently the Shawan County Democratic Party chair. How you doing, Bill?
Thank you, Barbara. I'm doing very well, and thank you for that introduction. And we actually have been there 20 years, so time
you've been there
flies.
for a while. Time flies when you're having fun. Absolutely. Mr. Thurlis Little, who grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and served as professor and coach for Elizabeth City State University. How are you, sir?
Just fine.
Good. Thank you
Glad
so
to
much.
be here.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming. And Ms. Jo Baker, a retired clinical social worker who has lived in Edenton for more than 14 years and is responsible for starting the Reconciliation Group. How are you, Jo?
I'm good. Thank you, Barbara.
Good. Thank you. So before we talk about the group and so forth, I want to let's give our audience a sense of what Edenton is like today. If you were to go visit, what is it like from your perspective, Emma?
It's not that much different than when I left in 1969, insofar as the separation of races, is concerned. And but with the advent, of course, of the group, and with my history, what made me leave Edenton in the first place, it was easy for me to come back to see if things had changed, and if not, what I can do to help change.
And we'll talk a little bit more about what made you leave in the first place in just a minute. Jo, from your perspective, what is the town like? If I were to go there and visit today, what should I expect?
Well, it's really a very historical town. It's beautiful, and most of the buildings and the streets and all have been pretty well maintained, so it's a good place to go and spend a weekend if anybody wants to come just to have a pretty waterfront. A lot of historical sites to visit. Not a lot of restaurants, but the ones that are there are very good. And there's almost always some kind of a festival or peanut festival or the tour of the homes. And there are lots of things to do there for tourists if they want to come for a short visit.
Come there. So, Thurlis, then, what was it like back in the day, as they say, since you all felt there was a need for people to come together prior to 3 years ago? Would you have met Bill? Would you have met Jo? Would you have interacted at all?
Back in the day where I grew up, I would have met Bill. I would have met Jo in that community, which was a quaint southern university town.
Okay, Chapel Hill.
Chapel Hill. But since moving down east in North Carolina, and eventually moving to Edenton, North Carolina, it was a new ball of wax for me.
In what way?
It was a little different. What would ring true in my mind is the avid separation of the races as we go about our daily chores, as we go about our daily work. There was evidence that there was a vast separation, even when it came to community concerns and things of that nature.
So, for instance, if you went to city council meetings or town council meetings, that kind of thing, there was a separation there. Is that what you mean?
Yes. The separation that I'm speaking in terms of were visible separation points, like if you would walk into a facility, all right, even for town council meetings, you would have a grouping of whites in this area and a grouping of blacks in another area. And
nobody was intermingled.
That same type of separation went on in and around the town itself.
So, Bill, when back in the day, as we were talking about prior to the group coming together, would you have interacted with Emma or with Thurlis or seen them or what?
I would not have, probably on the basis of not wanting to, but on the basis of understanding the existing culture that is in the town. And when we moved there to Edenton in 1996, it was our impression was, and still is, that it's a very beautiful town, as Joe said. But what we were aware of is, as Thurlis was saying, that there has always been a separation of black and white, African American, and the whites who live there. And overlaid to that in recent years, probably in the last 25 or 30 years, has been an influx of people retiring down there. And the people retiring there are generally people who have come from northern states, who have a different concept of what segregation is, who in some ways have moved past in terms of cultural segregation, but not really in terms of accepting integration. So in Edenton, you had daily interchange with African Americans, but it wasn't what I would say on an equal basis, because the African American population was more of, and I don't use this word disparagingly, but it was a servant class. It was a class employed for purposes of economic benefit to the not intransigent, but the emboldened white population. So you acknowledged, but you didn't actually engage with African Americans. And it's a fear initially on our part of overstepping into a culture which wasn't perceived the same way by local whites.
And the three of you, so Joe, Thurlis, and Bill, you all are all transplants to Edenton.
Right.
Emma, you grew up there. You were born and raised there. So what was the separation? I mean, what were the rules?
Well, born a poor Edentonian, I was not even totally aware of the segregation because I lived in the country. And, of course, the schools were segregated, so I was going to a black elementary school and a black high school. So when I got into high school is when I became a member of the Civil Rights Movement, NAACP Youth Council. So the only way that I probably would have met Joe and Bill would be they would probably be on the jury when I was arrested for parading without a permit. Picketing without a permit. And in fact, I was arrested in front of the Taylor Theater now, Precious Theater now, but then it wasn't. We had to sit up top, But of course I didn't go because we were picketing the theater. So when I was arrested, the gentleman, the policeman who arrested me, couldn't even spell picketing. So the record, I had a record up until I went to D.C. to apply for a job. He said, have you ever been arrested? And, of course, I had to put, yes, I had been arrested. And then our case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And
this was to desegregate the theater.
Right.
Wow.
parading without a permit is what it's, was a charge. And the policeman couldn't even spell picketing. So that made me, made my chin go up and my head I threw back. And, I just became the activist, the one who just could not think of myself as being second class. So the only way I would have met Bill and Joe would be they would probably be on the jury where I would be, a defendant.
So when you were growing up, though, did your mother and father, your family, did they say to you, no, you can't play with the little white girl down the street, or this is where this is your place versus this is their place?
Well, that's another story because I grew up being raised by my grandmother because my mother passed when I was 14 months old. So I grew up with my grandmother, and of course, when the gentleman who became Dr. King's field secretary became our civil rights leader, he asked my grandmother, could I, join the movement, become an NAACP youth member. So of course, she did give her consent, but it got so chaotic in the movement as far as the whites were concerned that they were like put in the newspaper any child found picketing we would stop the $38 a month check that my grandmother was receiving. So of course that made me more incensed. So I told my grandmother when she read the paper and told me that I had to stop picketing so much and leave the movement alone. I told my grandmother, well, since we are supposed to be Christian and God fearing, no God is gonna make me second class. So she said, well, I'm going to pray for you. All I can do is pray for you. Because she knew I was just determined to make sure that I put myself out there to fight for freedom, as Mr. Franks, the leader, then wanted us to do. So then I just became an activist.
And so when you came back, from you went to D.C., you became a principal and taught in school systems and so forth. What made you come back to Edenton? Why would you go back to that type of environment?
What made me leave, of course, what really pushed me out was the assassination of Dr. King.
Oh, okay.
So once he got assassinated, I said, "No, I just can't take it anymore. These people are not getting the message. Let me go where the power is." So I went to D.C., and of course I applied for a job and got it, and I taught, my background to my students, and we had to deal not only with the students, but the parents and Congress, because D.C. is not a state.
Right.
So we had to deal with Congress. Provided our budget and all, so you had to you couldn't put yourself way out there. But what made me come back was my two brothers and my sister moved from New York back to Edenton. And I just decided that I would want to spend my veteran days with them. So that's why I came back. And of course, the first thing I did was go to the Dr. King celebration, for his birthday, and saw the racial taboo, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Tell us about racial taboo, Joe.
The book group that got started at the Methodist Church just to find like-minded people, really, because I had the feeling that this is wrong. All my life I've known that the racial situation in the eastern North Carolina was wrong, and was very sensitive to that. And I had lived in Chapel Hill for 20 years in Raleigh and all. I'm going to get to it.
No, that's fine. That's
but
fine.
anyway, I from a small child, I knew this was wrong, but I didn't know how to make a difference. So I did live eventually in Chapel Hill for 20 years in Raleigh and Rocky Mount, doing racial reconciliation work in those areas, but it was not of the quality that we do now. I think it was not a group. It was just churches coming together, or a black and white church doing some work at the women's prison ministry, that kind of thing. And when I moved to Edenton, it was like I felt like I'd stepped back in time, really having lived in Chapel Hill and Raleigh and all. So I was looking for like-minded people, so I started a book group first at the Methodist Church to help find those people that might feel the way I did. And we did find, I found about 20 or so, and we read and educated ourselves. And then we decided we wanted to do something for the community, an event. And I heard about the movie Racial Taboo by reading blood done sign my name. There was a character in the book, a true character from Oxford, Eddie McCoy. And one day at a meeting, Bill Miller, who was not a part of the book group, said, "What's your group doing, your book group doing?" And I said, "Well, we're looking for to do an event, and we've heard about this Eddie McCoy in Oxford. We want to go up and meet him and see if he'll come and help us do some kind of an event." So Bill went, and two other people, Dorothy Rhodes and Marty Badger, we rode to Oxford, met with him, and he said, "I've just been in this movie, Racial Taboo, and it is fantastic." Brian Grimm in Wilmington put it together, and so we got in touch with him and previewed the movie and said this would be perfect for our town.
Let me ask you a question before we get too far down. The book group, was it integrated?
We had one African American member who was a member of our church, Deborah Davis, came to our book group, and I think Dorothy Rhodes, who joined the church. So we had two. Towards the end of we started meeting in 2011 and met through 2014, or to the fall of 2013 actually, and then we started planning for our racial taboo event in 2014 that fall. So just two people in and out, because they were members. This was all church members. But
so when you decided that you were going to show the movie Racial Taboo and bring people together, were you nervous? Did you think no one would come? I mean, give me a sense of kind of, Bill, how that went.
We weren't sure what the response would be, but we were optimistic that we were doing the right thing.
Right.
And there is at the Methodist Church a large family life center in which we scheduled the program, and this was on a day in February 2014, so it's just been about 3 years ago that we started this. We had 350 people from the community show up for this.
Wow.
And it was really a free event. We charged a little bit for lunch so we wouldn't go in too much of a deficit.
Yes.
But the response was incredible, outstanding. And the film Racial Taboo Brian subtitled it A Conversation About Race.
Yeah.
And his focus was to find out why whites and blacks can't talk to each other, particularly why whites can't talk to blacks. And so that film was just an eye-opener for most of us who were in that room that day, and we had a panel of local people to talk about it afterwards and had a great question and answer session. And that really spawned the Racial Reconciliation Group, which from that day met every week.
And you continue to meet every
Well, we
week.
decided at that meeting that we decided ahead of time that we were going to have an ongoing group, and we offered Henry Louis Gates' Many Rivers to Cross as to start us off, and that
which is heard on,
and then we got into it and didn't want to stop. We couldn't after we enjoyed it so much. But that was the thing, the social thing. There was no place in Edenton for us to socialize together, to be social with one another, and that's what our church has provided. Our group is.
I see you shaking your head, Thurlis. Add to that. How was the interaction?
The interaction with the group was outstanding. My wife and I, when we first heard about the group, at that particular time, I was serving as the athletic director at Elizabeth City State University and had very little free time, to engage in various activities that were going on in the community. But when we heard about this group having moved to Edenton and raising a family there in Edenton, North Carolina, and understanding the situation as it was between the races, more especially understanding what was going to be the future of our children. Because in order for black children in Edenton, North Carolina, to survive and to move on to a career or a profession that would signify their educational level, all right, was very difficult.
So there were no jobs there that they could come to that equaled the educational attainments that they were achieving.
What we saw was that there were no jobs for black youth to come back to Edenton for. The white youth that came back home, either parents were establishing businesses or were already established with businesses, and they had something to come back to control in their lives, but it was totally different. So when we heard about this, we wanted to go see what was going on with this situation. And of course, we're still there years later.
Emma, you being the radical one, were you were you skeptical?
No.
You thought
because in the first
We met
Dr.
each
King
other.
story in his program, they had put this card advertising racial taboo.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people came to see that. Then it said, if you're interested, come and we're going to meet again to see the many rivers to cross.
Mm-hmm.
And, being the radical, I was all in. From King's birthday celebration to racial taboo to many rivers to cross to meeting every Thursday night at 7 o'clock.
So I want to hear some of the stories. I mean, what were some of the things that came out or come out of your discussions on Thursday nights? Bill, let me start with you. Is there a story that sticks out in your mind that you were just surprised about, or you just had no idea?
I think the broader impression that I have from the group is that there's a wide range of emotional experiences attached to the individual's existence in a racially segregated community or in a community which is racially integrated but not truly fully accepting of a African American population. Mm-hmm. So those stories began to come out in full in this group, and it didn't happen right away. It takes time to develop a trust level with the 30 to 40 people that were showing up every week, and they're through the trust it evolves through some confrontation in the group, some statements that challenge white beliefs about African Americans or vice versa. And in a general way, that trust level just developed because we were able to talk about those things. People did not get angry. People did not walk away. People sat and listened to each other. And that, for me, was the highlight, has been the highlight of this group. And we draw more people in who have heard about this, who talk to friends about this, who come to the group because that trust is there, and it's not forced at all.
Can you recall any of the initial conversations, the tough conversations that you had to hear?
There is a gentleman who is about my age who is part of the group, and this gentleman, I kind of knew him before the group started, but this is interesting. I knew him based on his reputation, and he is someone who has always confronted employment situations, social situations, educational situations, by being the lone voice in the African American. And in some ways, I don't mean lone voice being the only one, but being the one who went to council meetings and challenged.
So he would stand up and he would say,
Yes.
"This is unfair. This is,"
and he came to the group because I don't know that he believed us initially.
He has been to every meeting except for two, one when his granddaughter graduated and one other had to go out of town for a funeral. He has been to every group.
And we didn't have to win him over. He maybe won us over to a certain degree, but he is so steeped in the history and tradition of that past Edenton, which he grew up in, as Dr. Bonner did, but he has always understood it from a different perspective than what we have coming into the community. And he sees through this group, I think, growth occurring, change occurring, that he never would have expected without the existence of this
She
group.
wants some stories, and I want to give you 2 short ones.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me do this first. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What are you curious about in terms of what these people have experienced through the reconciliation group? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about race and reconciliation with members of the Edenton, North Carolina Reconciliation Group, Dr. Emma Bonner, Mr. Bill Miller, Mr. Thurlis Little, and Ms. Joe Baker. Okay, Joe, stories.
Well, the same gentleman, and I don't know whether I should call his name or not, but he, as a young person, could not, he served in the military, but he said he came home and he could not go in the front door of the local drugstore, but the German prisoners who had been held out at Harvey's Point could come in, trustee prisoners could come in the front door. He said he never could understand that. He could go and serve his country, but he could not go in the front door of that drugstore. So that was always hard. And then the other story is about, he's kind of our patriarch in our group, and he's much older than you, I think. But then the story from who I consider our matriarch is a lovely woman who didn't grow up in Edenton, but she been there many, many years. Her family started Somerset Plantation down in Cresswell. She is of that family, the Collins family. That's not her name. But she said she is a very active member of the group, she and her daughter, who comes all the way from Chapel Hill from a friend's church to be with her when she can. And this individual says that she hopes that, and her family were slaveholders at Somerset, that she hopes that the community will not hold, or the black community will not hold that against her, that her family were slaveholders.
Wow.
So with those stories have been shared, and you can tell that these have been emotionally expressed stories for these people. And
Is there something that, and I want to ask this of each of you, is there some story that you heard that you were just totally surprised about, that you had no idea that the other race thought X? Dr. Bonner.
Oh, there are a lot of stories, but I can't think of any particular one. But I would just like to mention about this nice lady that Joe was talking about. I went to a fundraiser for a gentleman in 2009, I think it was. And this lady is sitting up there with a button, "Old White Woman for Obama." And since then, we just gelled. Her spirit is so good. And like you said, with the Somerset thing, she said, don't hold her accountable for her family holding slaves in the day. And of course, the gentleman that he was talking about, we, initially, when we formed the group, he and I were always bumping heads, because it's almost like he was saying he couldn't get over the past. That.
So you were trying to help him to move forward.
I'm trying. That happened, but we can't rewind. So those are 2 stories, and I think in that group, though, you get those stories from people who have joined the group who feel that they can trust the rest of us with their story, with something that they felt badly about. Like someone would share that they couldn't get a loan. And that's the first time they shared that with people. We couldn't get a loan back in the day to build a house, and she and her husband had to struggle. Somebody else said they went into the bank and applied for an application for something, and the lady took the application and all, and she just happened to glimpse the back when she was going out the door, and they tore the application up because she was black. And there was everybody had a story to share, and they were glad to share it with an integrated group. And they wouldn't have dared say that to a group where it was just with white people in it before. And of course, there were some people that are white were just couldn't believe that some of the experiences that some of the people had. They couldn't believe it. And then they would say, well, let's go to a movie. Let's go to a movie. Then I said, I will go, because that's the same movie I couldn't go into years ago, back in the day.
And you went with Bill and his wife, right?
And I go with him, and we do the reverse Oreo sit down.
So it was Bill, you in the middle, and his wife on the other side.
That's
How
correct.
did you feel when you walked in that theater?
Oh, it was weird, because the only time I have been in there was that day. The other time I was there, I was getting arrested. And so it was weird. And you had to go around and see if the walls were still there. I had to look all around, just like, what is this? And this is, it was weird. It was really weird. But, I got over it because the movie was good.
Was the movie?
Interestingly, too, that the theater manager now is very supportive of community progress in racial situations. And so he has talked to us about films that we would be interested in seeing playing there. He's in it's a market where you have to show first-run films to stay alive, and you only get about 2 weeks to show those films. But he just had Hidden Figures playing for 2 weeks, and he's just delighted with the kind of response that he gets from the white and
Have you guys gotten
African-American.
any resistance? Anybody saying, look, I don't care what you do. This is Edenton. Black stay over here, white stay over there. We're not dealing with this.
Surprisingly, they haven't expressed much to us, and our church is very supportive. And some of the other churches are now beginning to look at reconciliation ministries. Just one church in town, and some other churches out in Camden, and I know up in.
And all of your members are not necessarily members of the church. Right?
No, we have probably
different.
probably 17 or 18 churches represented, and some Unitarians, I guess that's a church, and some people who are not churched.
Okay.
And the good thing is that we still keep new people come. We had 2 new people come last week, and a couple of people from my own church joined a few months ago. I mean, that's the thing to me that is pleasing, that new people can come in and fit in. Sometimes it's hard to fit into a group, but we don't. It's not a real structured situation like you would go to a meeting where there's. So I think that helps. So we try to keep it a conversation.
And you just have conversation.
But we do invite people to come and speak to us. Like if somebody wants to hear the mayor or whatever town manager, we invite people to come and speak to us. So it's always ongoing education.
Thurlis, was there anything that you had that any story that you heard or anything that struck you as, wow, I'm glad we did this, but I had no idea they were thinking this?
Yes, I have.
Can you share one?
One story is that there are some people that were very attentive to the group as we were formulating and as we moved on. And then they just fell by the wayside. And talking to some of those people, their analogy of the group was that y'all don't do anything.
So they didn't feel that the conversation was helpful, that it wasn't changing anything.
I think their whole thing was that they were looking for a group or for a set of people that were going to be anti this and anti that, and not necessarily trying to work together. So the conversation was that all y'all do is talk. I've heard that.
It's always a problem in expectations of what your model should be for a group. Yes.
That's it. And then I've had individuals say to me personally, why are you going to that group?
And what do you say?
Say they, and the statement that would follow the why would be, they really don't care nothing about you. So again, what I was hearing was thought patterns of years past, and how people were still holding on to those things that happened in the past. And that's why I say all the time that my experience in growing up was slightly different. Chapel Hill was not a honey hole by no means, but it was a Southern University town, and a lot of the people that owned businesses and a lot of people that stayed on in the area came from the North to attend the University of North Carolina.
So you had a more global experience in Chapel Hill.
So I had more of a global experience, and then to come to Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and then from Elizabeth City to Edenton, was a whole new ball of wax for me.
I tell you, let's go to the phone. Shauna joins us from Yorktown. Hi, Shauna, you on the air?
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I wanted to mention my church also showed the movie Racial Taboo, and I found it to be incredibly moving. It was so powerful. Our church partnered with a church from the East End and Newport News, and we came together and we were assigned seats so that we were all integrated in every possible way. And the discussions we had after seeing this movie were incredibly moving. There were tears from just about everybody at our table. I learned things that I had never even thought could happen in the state of Virginia. And, you know, I've studied history pretty extensively and was just shocked. And my eyes were really opened to a lot of a reality that I just had no idea was continuing to go on. And the struggles, especially that were facing some of the teenage African Americans who we were discussing this movie with. And I'm thankful that you all brought that movie up, and hopefully more people will see that and really have the raw power of that movie create conversations. And it really emboldened me to begin conversations with other people on race and to ask more questions about it.
I was going to ask you, Shauna, what were you doing as a result of this? So are you encouraging more conversation?
I am in another small, actually it's a Bible study with, it's integrated, and have really been asking some of the African American women in the group about their specific experiences and how, you know, just to even approach these conversations in an appropriate way, and to really try to see a wider spectrum of what people are walking through and have walked through. And the stories that and experiences that have been brought to my attention have just been amazing. I mean, from civil rights leaders to challenges in even getting into different colleges, and not even that long ago. Yeah. It's just been amazing. And I'm very grateful that the director of that movie came to our church and had us watch it and gave us the opportunity to learn. And thank you for, you know, giving me the opportunity to hear this conversation.
Thank you, Shauna. We really appreciate your call. Thank you very, very much. So, Bill, I'm sorry, Thurlis, when you were talking about the folks who say, you know, they really don't care about you, you mentioned also, Emma, there are people out there who feel that this is not a positive thing. How do you work past that? Because you have to acknowledge their feelings, I would think. But at the same time, you're also trying to guide folks to a new place on both sides, on the black side and the white side. So how do you acknowledge their feelings, but yet hopefully bring them in some sort of way?
Well, it takes a strong disposition to listen to someone that says to you, what you're doing in essence is not right. But that's their belief. And they have a right to their belief. But I also have a right to my belief. And my belief is what I was doing and what I was participating in was something that may not pay off for me in the present, but it's going to help someone in the future. And it's plain and simple as that.
I want to ask each of you this, though. What did you learn, or what have you learned about yourself going through this exercise? What have you learned about yourself in terms of what you thought about race relations, what you currently think about race relations? Who wants to start? Bill.
About myself,
Yeah.
I've learned that I am one who has always felt I practiced tolerance and understanding, and am slow to make judgments. But I find in hearing the stories, as Shauna was talking about, the things that bring tears to your eyes, that my depth of experience is nowhere near what many of the African Americans have experienced. And so for me, it's an awakening as to the depth of what they have gone through, and in a lot of ways what is still going on. We don't have, in our small community, it would be text or the context would be benign neglect, let's say, where you don't have outright attitudes. There was a history of racial violence back when Dr. Bonner was there, and some incidents which were really ugly. But now we have it existing more as a matter of not paying attention in the general community, and it's a small community, as you said, 5,000 people.
Yeah.
And the way that it begins to change is we have observed some of the town council, African Americans on town council, African Americans in county commissioners' seats, and they aren't necessarily part of our group. They don't have to be, but they, by example, are beginning to make changes in this small community. The geography is such that I think we have a chance to be effective, and then perhaps through continuation of our group becoming more involved in nonpartisan elections. Our mayor and council are nonpartisan. So there are things like that that we can talk about, and we can feel that we're being substantively involved in making a better situation in the community.
Emma, what did you learn? What have you learned about yourself?
It's strange because at 17, 18, when I, came into being, really knowing myself, I believed then that just like a tree that's planted by the water, I shall not be moved. I felt that then. I feel that now. I've always been, since the age of 17, an activist, one who just thought I was just as good as anybody else. I thought that then. My fifth grade teacher wrote on the back of, they had those little blue books that kept our attendance in. Mm-hmm. And my best friend and I had to go in the back and write up whatever he had written up, and about attendance and about the growth or whatever they had to say about each of us. And he said, when I was in fifth grade, she is outstanding. She's scored on 13th grade, but she has a superiority complex. I didn't know what it meant.
You didn't know what that meant then?
Didn't know what it meant until I got to high school. So, I just thought I was somebody early on, and that hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. And I guess, even now when we go to our meetings, some of my friends in the meeting say, I know she didn't say that. I know she didn't do that. Last night she said, Deborah said, girl said, you trying to boss the white people around. I said, I've always bossed white people around. I've always pushed back on them, because I know that, I do the right thing. They should do the right thing. If I do something they didn't like and they want to arrest me for it, I will just take it to the next level and keep on doing it if it was right. Mm-hmm. And I just, like a tree that's planted by the water, I just shall not be moved.
Thurlis, what did you learn? What have you learned about yourself? We got about 4 minutes left, believe it or not.
Strangely enough, what I've actually learned about myself, I grew up with a real touchy attitude and quick-tempered. I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. And since becoming an adult, and then since being in an organization like our reconciliation group, to a great extent I've learned to listen to certain things and sort of vex my temper and to try to see the other side, whereas there was a time in my life when I would fly off the handle. But it's changing. I don't know if that's age or, or is it, the attitude. But I would like to say that as a result of being in this organization, I've made many friends, many more friends that I did not have at that particular time. And I've been able to associate with different organizations that I had no thought pattern of ever being a part of. And I think it's a result of this reconciliation. and being able to see both sides.
I want to get to Joe, make sure we have enough
Okay.
time. What have you learned, Joe? You started this.
Well, as a young person, I saw the disparities and didn't know how to do anything about it. And I have learned that even though I'm living with the ghost of Jim Crow still very much alive, Jim Crow laws are gone, but the ghost is still very much alive, that I can make a difference. And I'm a fairly quiet, I'm not an outgoing person, but it doesn't matter.
Really?
I am determined. I am absolutely determined that I'm going to make a difference, and I have. And that is the most rewarding thing in the world, to know that in your point in history, you are in a place where you can help make improvements to the situation. So it's very rewarding. And
So real quick, because I want to try to get this in, but for you, Joe, and for Bill, what would you say to white people about being not afraid to venture in and have this conversation?
don't be
Just real
afraid.
quick.
For goodness sakes, don't. Reach out to people of color in your area and build relationships. Go out to lunch. Invite them to your home. Make those connections, because together you all, now we as a group are beginning to make differences in our community because we're doing it together.
And I would say the idea is that you can do that one-on-one in the community. In a small community, it's very easy to do it one-on-one. And don't be afraid to walk up to somebody you don't know of a different skin color and find out something about them, whether it be in a social setting or on the street. We have all those opportunities. We just haven't done it enough.
And for Emma and for you, Thurlis, from the Black perspective, what would you tell somebody? 10 seconds each.
Oh,
Just a line.
we're all in this together. We all have red blood. We all want our children to be happy, and we all want someone to love us, or everybody to love us.
Okay, Thurlis, you get the last word.
Hold on. Hold on.
Change is coming.
Change is coming.
Thank you all so very much for joining us today. This has been a joy to meet each and every one of you. We really appreciate it, and we will be right back.
I'm with Marcellus, and you all are checking out Another View.
And welcome back. When musical greats Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald came together in song, it was nothing short of magical. Now that electrifying chemistry is being reborn through the musical talents of singer Marva Hicks and trumpet player Byron Stripling. Our Lisa Godley sat down with the talented duo as they prepared for their tribute performance with the Virginia Symphony Orchestra.
Jazz great Louis Armstrong could light up a stage, whether it was with his magnificent trumpet playing or his distinctive singing voice.
I see trees of green, red roses too.
Another legend who consistently packed concert halls was the First Lady of Song, Ella Fitzgerald.
Heaven, I'm in heaven.
And when those two performers came together, it was nothing short of explosive.
The way you wear your hat, the way you sip your tea, the memory of...
Now, some 60 years later, two talented artists are introducing the music of Louis and Ella to new audiences. This tribute to the legends is the brainchild of trumpet player Byron Stripling.
Always loved Louis Armstrong. Something about the sound of his trumpet, which to me is the sound of New Orleans, which is the sound of America. And there's something about that grabs people's ears and does something to them emotionally that's almost something you can't describe.
Joining Stripling on stage is singer Marva Hicks, whose credentials include duets with Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson.
This love is forever, that's the answer. I hear your voice now, you are my...
Hicks says she's been an Ella fan ever since she first heard her sing A Tisket a Tasket, a song Hicks performs in the tribute show.
A tisket, a tasket, a brown and yellow basket.
Who can be Louis? Who can be Ella? We are bringing our spirit infusing our spirits with theirs, I should say, because I like to wrap myself in Ella. I think I'd like to wrap myself in her joy.
And put it in her pocket.
For the past few years, Stripling and Hicks have collaborated, wowing audiences with their tribute to Satchmo and the First Lady of Song.
I think Ella's impact was individuality. I think she gave female singers a new sense of freedom, especially when she became the incredible scatter that she was. She set the standard. She set it so high. I think she gave women permission to, do your thing. Seriously believe that. I literally believe she opened the door for the female jazz singer of our time to just walk on into what you do and to do it well.
Before Louis Armstrong, the way people conceptualized how one should sing was always with a European concept of tone or sound. So everybody was like, Don Giovanni. And Louis Armstrong said, so a whole different concept of sound and phrasing. And we just imbue our spirits with their spirits.
Exactly.
Do it our way, because by the way, that's the only way a jazz musician can do it. We do imitation, and we do imitation for learning, and then when we walk on our stage, we are ourselves. That's the highest honor that we can give Louis and Ella, is to do it our way. They would expect that of us, because that's what jazz is.
Their tribute introduces to some and reminds others of the incredible contributions Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald made to music, each bringing to the table unique styles that influenced musicians and singers worldwide and helped shape generations. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And Ella Fitzgerald was born April 25th, 1917 in Newport News, Virginia. She would have been 100 years old this year. We hope that you were inspired by all that you heard during today's show. And if you'd like to become a part of a discussion where people of different races can share, let me invite you to join us for our next Race Let's Talk About It Town Hall. It's Tuesday, February the 21st at 6:30 at the Fort Monroe Theater in Hampton. The topic is The Talk, the conversation Black and Latino families have with their children on how to interact with police. The town hall is free and open to everyone, but we would like to see you register. Please visit whro.org/talkaboutrace and sign up. And we sure hope to see you there. And at any time, send us your thoughts about Another View. We're on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. Next week, it's the Another View Roundtable, lively and insightful conversation from our pundits Roger Chesley, Carol Pretlow, Bill Thomas, and Will Leviste. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Kamaria Mason answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thanks so much for listening to Another View.